Our guest, Cormak Smith, ex-advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, is on the line. Welcome back, Mr. Smith, sir.
Henry, lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you again indeed. I've been recently asking myself and my guests this: what do you think Putin could be expecting from the staged elections, the so-called elections? Show if internationally everyone knows it is a fake, and domestically, internally within Russia, no one even knows about the international reactions, since all the alternative to Kremlin's media sources has been just shut and cut. So what is the reason for all this?
Well, look, nobody apart from Mr. Putin knows what goes on in that head of his. But clearly, any elections in the four oblasts that have been that Russia has claimed to annex, and of course they don't control all of any of the four oblasts that they have claimed to annex. Any elections in those oblasts would be completely illegitimate. And, you know, as an example, in 2014, when Russia illegally annexed Crimea, they immediately held elections where, I don't know, something in the high 90s of people supposedly said they wanted to be in Russia. Now, we know that those elections were not properly run. We know that nobody in the international community recognizes them. So any elections that would be held in these four oblasts would have absolutely no value whatsoever to Ukraine or to the international community. They would be meaningless. What Putin hopes to achieve from that is anybody's guess, but they would be completely illegitimate and meaningless.
Well, my guess, personally, is that this is all a stage show for internal domestic audience who just doesn't care.
Well, I agree. And, you know, every time we look at polls from Levada, which is probably the
right.
most respected of the polls, unfortunately, these polls show that the majority of the Russian people still support Putin and still support, his genocidal war on Ukraine. And we know that the Russian people are fed a constant diet of lies and genocidal rhetoric every night on state-controlled television. So this has got to have something to do with it. But I think we must also say we cannot deny the Russian people responsibility for this either, because, you know, they must be able to, have access to information which tells them what is going on. So I'm afraid that this is more evidence. This is not just Putin's war. This is Russia's war. And this is a war which is unfortunately supported by the overwhelming majority of the Russian people. And that's very sad, but that seems to be how it is. And that's what all the evidence has told us from the very beginning of this further invasion in February 2022.
So are you saying, Cormak, Putin dies tomorrow, nothing changes in Russia's foreign policy? Do you foresee any possible changes in Russian foreign policy if Putin dies tomorrow, hopefully?
I'm afraid, Henry, I'm not optimistic. My education in this began back in 2014 when I started to get invited out to former communist states, both former Soviet republics, but also former states from behind the Iron Curtain, and also in the Balkans, the former Yugoslavia. And at these meetings where I was invited, to speak on government communications, and I spoke in about 10 different countries, I met lots and lots of very, very interesting senior people from different countries. And I well remember one conversation I had with it was a member of Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats at the time, who was in Bosnia and Herzegovina at the same time as me, but doing some different capacity building work. And I can well remember a conversation that I had with this gentleman and another person saying, if Putin were to go, that there are most likely worse behind him in the Kremlin. So everything we have seen from the recent so-called attempted coup by Prigozhin and the other people that we know to be around, I think I would not be optimistic that if Putin were to disappear tomorrow, if anything would change. This is clearly Russia's war, and it has been driven by a kleptocratic regime in the Kremlin that has been based on nothing but mafia and KGB principles. So I think the message is, unfortunately, nothing would change. And there are those people who are speculating at the moment that Putin may indeed already be dead, and there's people that speculate about body doubles and so forth. We simply don't know the truth. But no, I don't think anything would necessarily change.
There is one thing that actually matters. There is such an information that Serbia gives passports to Russian citizens on a massive scale. What is this? If this is true, why and what for?
Well, there has long, and certainly going back to 2014, which I've already said was where my education in what I refer to as the Eastern neighborhood and Russia's malign influence there began. There have been very, very concerning relations between Russia and Serbia. And we unfortunately, Serbia is not in NATO, but Serbia is a worry along with some other countries like Hungary at the moment. So I would be very, very concerned about this because it's the enemy within.
Serbia and Hungary, how big is this enemy, you think, in terms of, let's say, European Union?
Well, obviously, Hungary is a member of both the European Union and NATO. And as far back as 2017, 2018, I was working closely with the Minister for Education and Science in Ukraine, where Hungary was causing a lot of problems because of some tensions with ethnic Hungarians inside Ukraine, and they were causing a lot of tensions and trouble for Ukraine because Ukraine was looking to, if you like, to elevate the status of the Ukrainian language, which is a natural thing for any nation state to do. So, Hungary has long been, and because of the way the EU works and NATO works, unfortunately, Hungary is in a position to frustrate a lot of what those two bodies would want to do to support Ukraine. So again, Hungary is a problem.
Can we deal with these problems somehow? What can you suggest? Just to take a closer look, to wait? Are there any tools? Are there any instruments? What can we do about it at this point?
Personally, and it's a very personal view, I would like to see Hungary ejected from both the EU and NATO. But I'm not aware of I'm not aware of an easy mechanism for that to be done. And, in a way, Putin uses our democracy against us. And, the one thing that we know about Putin and Putin's Russia is that they are absolutely opposed and hell-bent on destroying our international rules-based order, which may not be perfect, but it's been responsible for the greatest period of peace and prosperity that the world has ever known since 1945, when we came out of the ashes of the Second World War. Now, there is ample evidence, going back, I always like to quote Sergei Lavrov at the Munich Security Conference in 2017, who in a speech talked about the coming asunder of the old order, the rules-based international order, and talked about the rise of the post-West era. And I've written many articles and I've spoken many times recently about this. That would be a post-West era led by Russia, likely as a junior partner to China. We know that North Korea, Iran, Syria, and Belarus are already in Russia's pocket. And we have a lot of concerns about some very, very big countries in the BRICS in particular, Brazil, South Africa, and India, who are at best can be described to be on the fence with this conflict, and if anything, leaning in Russia's direction. So I think this tells us that, I've always said, for people like myself and you, Henry, the moral reason for supporting Ukraine is more than enough. Genocide is being committed in a European country for the last 18 months in 2023. But even if you're one of those people who don't care, this is a wolf that will come to our door. Because if we don't stop Putin definitively in Ukraine and defeat Russia, and a lot in the West seem to have a problem with talking about ultimate defeat of Russia. But if Russia is not defeated, it's our very rules-based order in the longer term which will be under huge threat. And my feeling is China, who are playing a long game and are sitting on the fence and are certainly, while they might seem sympathetic to Russia, they are certainly not playing out what would be expected from what I think they call their no limits partnership or their no limits friendship. So China is being cautious at the moment, but it's only absolute strength and determination from the West in supporting Ukraine and making sure that Ukraine will win that will ultimately, I believe, secure our way of life going forward. And I honestly believe that it's our way of life wrapped up in the rules-based order that is very much at threat here. There is more at stake in Ukraine than Ukraine.
Thank you very much for your very detailed answer, as always. Secretary General of the United States, when you were last time in Ukraine, started the process. Well, I hope that this is the start of the process, that the frozen assets of the Russian dictatorship can finally be released in favor of Ukraine. Do you think that this is the start of it? Do you think that this is the start of that process and Ukraine can be gaining of that very soon?
I sincerely hope that it is. There are 2 points here. The great Bill Browder said, way back at the start of this war, that the way to get to Putin was to follow the money. And the fact that, Putin's great wealth, most of it was held in trust by probably a small group of about 50 oligarchs. So, freezing their wealth and further releasing that for the rebuilding of Ukraine, which, by the way, has been put at as high as $1 trillion to date, would be a very, very good start. So I can only say, yes, we've heard some very promising noises from the international community and key figures in the American administration. I can only hope that we are determined on this and that we will do this, because at the end of the day, remember, Putin is a criminal. He cares only about himself and his own wealth and his own position, as do those around him. So I go back to what Bill Browder said almost 18 months ago, to follow the money, and that was the way to get to him. And I'm not sure that we have done that significantly enough as yet.
Well, but Mr. Blinken was here. He was meeting our minister, and it was said that all the money that has been frozen now will go to Ukraine. Isn't that the start finally of the process? Or you have your shades of the doubts? Or should we be expecting this money to be released to Ukraine very soon, do you think?
If Anthony Blinken has said that, and I know he has, by the way, and he is somebody that I would regard very, very highly as a diplomat of the highest standard and integrity, I think it's a really, really strong signal. I think it is very good news. But, I was thinking, Henry, just before I came on to speak to you, I was reviewing some interviews. I've been doing interviews since the middle of January in 2022, over a month before the full-time invasion. And I had a saying that what we needed to do was to arm Ukraine to the teeth and sanction Russia back to the Stone Age. Now, while we have given Ukraine a huge amount of support in terms of armaments, it has been incremental. It is still not enough. We know the Ukrainians have been prosecuting a very, very difficult counteroffensive without the air superiority that one would expect them to need, and against very, very well prepared, deep Russian defenses and very deep minefields. Now, we do know that counteroffensive is making progress. It is going forward. And we know that probably in the last 6 to 8 weeks, Ukraine has regained more land than Russia captured in the previous year before that. And I think people in the international community need to give Ukraine more credit for what they are doing. Ukraine, obviously, also, and many of their people, including General Zaluzny, has said one of the reasons they will progress slowly is to save and preserve as many Ukrainian lives as possible. They are progressing with great care, and they're having to do this because they don't have the air cover. They don't have the amount of long-range artillery that they have been begging for. I believe the Germans have still not signed off on Taurus, which is a very simple...
We're really limited in time at the moment.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much for your detailed answers and for your expertise, and again for your time. And I hope to see you soon with us again, Mr. Smith.
Henry, it's always a pleasure to join you. I'm here for you anytime I can help.
Thank you very much.